The email came on a Thursday afternoon, sent to the entire marketing department at Stratford Creative Group. It was from Margaret Chin in Human Resources, and the subject line was simple and professional: Employee Separation, Jason Brenner. I didn't think much of it at first. People left jobs all the time. Companies sent out notifications to their departments and life went on. I skimmed the email, noted that Jason had been a graphic designer in our department, and returned my attention to the client presentation I was working on. But then something nagged at me. I'd been at Stratford Creative for 4 years, and I knew everyone in the marketing department reasonably well. We weren't a huge company, about 60 people across 3 departments, so faces were familiar. But I didn't recognize the name Jason Brenner. I didn't have a mental image of someone with that name sitting near me or across the bullpen or anywhere in the office. I checked the directory. Nothing. I went through the company intranet looking at the department roster. The graphic design team listed 3 people: Derek Morrison, Sarah Chin, no relation to Margaret, and Michael West. No Jason Brenner. I felt a strange sense of cognitive dissonance, like I was missing something obvious. An email about a departing employee, but no actual employee to correspond with it. I should have let it go. That would have been the smart thing to do. But curiosity got the better of me and I decided to ask someone. Derek Morrison was the lead graphic designer, and he sat 3 desks over from me. I walked over to his workspace and leaned against the partition. "Hey Derek, did you know Jason Brenner?" I asked. Derek looked up from his computer, his expression confused. "Who?" "Jason Brenner. HR just sent out an email saying he was leaving the company." "I don't know anyone by that name," Derek said slowly, "and I work with the graphic design team. I think I'd know if someone was leaving." "Yeah, that's what I thought," I said. "It's weird. The email said he was a graphic designer, but I can't find him in any of the records." Derek's expression shifted. He suddenly looked uncomfortable, almost afraid. "Maybe there's a mistake. Maybe HR sent the email to the wrong department." "Maybe," I said, but it didn't feel like maybe. It felt like something else. Something uncomfortable. I went back to my desk and pulled up the email again. I read it more carefully this time. "It is with regret that Stratford Creative Group announces the separation of Jason Brenner from our organization, effective immediately. Jason's contribution to our marketing and design efforts will be greatly missed. Please join us in wishing him well in his future endeavors." It was impersonal, generic, the kind of template email that HR probably sent for every departure. But there were no details about Jason's position, his tenure, his accomplishments, or his plans after leaving. And it was sent to the entire marketing department, not just the design team. I did something that in retrospect was probably foolish. I replied to the email, asking Margaret Chin if she could tell me more about Jason's position and tenure. The reply came within minutes. "Hi David, I'm not sure what you mean. There has been no employee separation in the marketing department today. Please disregard the previous email. It appears to have been sent in error. Margaret." I stared at that response for a long time. She said there had been no separation. But she just sent the email about Jason Brenner. Was this some kind of corporate misdirection, damage control for some reason? Or was Margaret confused? I looked in my inbox for the original email. It was gone. I checked my deleted items folder. Not there either. I searched my email for Jason Brenner and got no results. I searched for Brenner and nothing came up. But I knew I'd seen the email. I knew I'd read it. The memory was fresh and clear. So either my email system was malfunctioning or something very strange was happening. I opened a chat window and messaged Sarah, the other designer on Derek's team. "Hey, quick question. Do you know anyone named Jason Brenner at the company?" The response was immediate. "No, why?" "Just curious. Someone mentioned him earlier, thought maybe he was new or something." "Nope. Never heard of him." I didn't sleep well that night. The whole situation had a dreamlike quality that bothered me. I kept thinking about the email, trying to reconstruct it in my mind. The exact wording. The timestamp. The fact that Margaret Chin had sent it and then denied sending it. When I got to work the next morning, I went straight to the HR office. Margaret was at her desk, doing something on her computer. Hey Margaret, I wanted to ask you about that email from yesterday. The one about Jason Brenner leaving the company. Margaret looked up at me and I saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Recognition? It was hard to tell, but it was definitely something. I don't know what you're talking about, she said carefully. I didn't send any email like that. Yes, you did, I said. You sent it to the marketing department yesterday afternoon. And then when I replied asking for more information, you said it was sent in error and that there had been no separation. That never happened, Margaret said, and now her voice had taken on a harder edge. David, I'm not sure what game you're playing, but I would suggest you stop. There's no Jason Brenner. There was no email. And if you continue to insist otherwise, I'm going to have to escalate this to management. This is insane, I said. I saw the email. I read it. No, you didn't, Margaret said firmly. And I'm going to ask you to leave my office now. I left, my heart pounding. Margaret had never been cold to me before. We'd always had a pleasant, professional relationship. But in that conversation, she'd been openly hostile, and there was something in her eyes that suggested genuine fear. I went back to my desk and did something I'd never done before at work. I went looking through the company's archived emails. I had access to a shared drive that contained correspondence from the past year, and I searched through it methodically, looking for any mention of Jason Brenner. Nothing. Not a single email, memo, or document mentioned him. I expanded my search to old calendars, meeting notes, project files. Nothing. It was as if Jason Brenner had never existed within the company's digital infrastructure. But someone existed. Someone who'd been deleted, and then the person who'd sent the deletion notice had denied sending it. I wanted to ask someone else about it, but I was now genuinely afraid. Derek's reaction had been one of fear. Margaret's had been one of hostile denial. What would happen if I pressed further? What would happen if I kept asking questions about a person who apparently didn't exist? That night, I did something even more foolish. I looked through old company photos. Stratford had a culture of taking team pictures, and these were usually posted on the intranet in a memories section. I scrolled through photos from the past 2 years, looking at the marketing department. In photos from 6 months ago, I saw someone, a man who wasn't in more recent photos. He had blonde hair and a somewhat unremarkable face, the kind of face you'd forget immediately after seeing it. The caption under the photo listed all the names of the people in it, going left to right. And there, third from the left, was the name Jason Brenner. I copied the photo to my personal drive, wanting to preserve the evidence. But when I looked at the original photo on the company intranet minutes later, Jason was gone. The photo had been edited. He'd been removed, digitally erased from the image. The caption had been updated as well, with his name deleted from the list. I was so startled that I actually made a sound, a small gasp of shock. The woman at the desk across from me glanced over to see if I was okay. I told her I was fine and closed the photo. I spent the entire evening staring at the copy of the photo I'd saved. Jason Brenner's face, now erased from the company's records, stared back at me. He looked normal, ordinary, unmemorable, the kind of person you'd pass on the street without noticing. But someone had cared enough to delete him. The next morning I called in sick to work. I couldn't face going in, couldn't face seeing Margaret Chin or Derek Morrison or anyone else. I was terrified that by asking questions, I'd already done something that had consequences. I started researching online. I searched for Jason Brenner and got thousands of results, but none of them seemed to match the person in the photo. I searched for Jason Brenner Stratford Creative and got nothing. I looked at the company's LinkedIn page, which listed past employees. Jason wasn't there. It was like he'd never existed. But I had photographic proof that he had. On the second day of my absence, I received a call from my manager, Patricia. David, is everything okay? We've been wondering where you are. Just dealing with some personal stuff, I said vaguely. I should be back tomorrow. Okay, well, Margaret wants to see you when you come in. Just a routine check-in, she said. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time, trying to decide what to do. I could go back to work and face whatever was waiting for me. Or I could quit and try to move on, forget about Jason Brenner and the strange erasure that seemed to have occurred. but I couldn't forget. Knowing what I knew was like having a splinter in my mind. It wouldn't let me rest. I went back to work on the third day. Margaret was waiting for me. She'd scheduled a meeting with me, Patricia, and someone I'd never seen before, a tall, thin man in a very expensive suit. He introduced himself as David Kramer, Regional Director for the company's parent organization. "David, we'd like to talk to you about some concerning behavior," Margaret began. "You've been asking questions about employees, searching through company records, making claims about emails that don't exist. This kind of behavior is concerning to us." "I'm not making claims about emails that don't exist," I said. "I received an email about Jason Brenner. I have proof." "What proof?" David Kramer asked, his voice calm and measured. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo of Jason Brenner that I'd saved. I held it up for them to see. Margaret and Patricia both stared at it. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. Finally, David Kramer spoke. "That's an interesting photo," he said. "Where did you get it?" "From the company intranet. From the memories section. It was posted 6 months ago." "And you still have the original on our system?" Patricia asked. "No. It's been deleted. The person in the photo has been removed from the image." David Kramer leaned back in his chair and studied me carefully. "David, I want to be very clear about something. Jason Brenner is not an employee of Stratford Creative Group. He never has been. The photo you're showing me is a fabrication, something you created using photo editing software. I know this because I've personally reviewed all company records going back 10 years, and there is no Jason Brenner." "I didn't create the photo," I said, and I could hear the desperation in my own voice. "It was on the company intranet." "No, it wasn't," David said flatly. "And I think you know that. I think what's happening here is that you're experiencing some kind of distress, some kind of confusion, and you're creating false memories to explain that distress. And that's something we need to address seriously." "I'm not creating false memories," I protested. "Then explain to me," David said, "how it's possible for an employee to exist in our records, leave the company, and then be completely erased from all documentation. Explain how that's technically feasible." "I don't know," I admitted, "but I know what I saw." "What you saw," David said, "was nothing. And what you're continuing to see is the absence of that nothing, and you're interpreting that absence as evidence of a conspiracy. That's a form of paranoia, David, and it's a form we take very seriously." He stood up and extended his hand. But it wasn't in greeting. It was dismissal. "I think what we need to do is have you evaluated by a professional. Someone who can help you work through whatever is causing these false beliefs. We're going to put you on a medical leave of absence, effective immediately. You'll be paid during this time, but you won't be working. And you'll be required to see a therapist, someone we recommend, to address these concerns." I wanted to argue, but I could see that resistance was futile. They'd already made their decision. In their minds, I was already crazy. I spent the next 2 weeks seeing a therapist named Dr. Reeves, whom Stratford had recommended. She was a competent-seeming woman in her 60s, with an office in a nice building downtown. Our sessions were professional and relatively brief. "Tell me about Jason Brenner," she'd say, and I'd repeat my story. How I'd seen the email, how I'd found the photo, how everyone denied that he existed. "These seem like intrusive thoughts," Dr. Reeves would respond. "False beliefs that your mind is constructing. Do you think it's possible that this is a form of delusion?" "No," I'd say. "I have the photo. I saved it on my phone." She'd ask to see it. I'd show her. And she'd nod thoughtfully and say, "It's interesting that you believe this is a photo of a real person. But it could also be someone you saw somewhere else, someone your brain has now associated with the workplace, creating a false narrative." I knew what was happening. They were gaslighting me, trying to convince me that my own memories and perceptions were faulty. And it was working. The more I talked to Dr. Reeves, the more I started to doubt myself. Was it possible that I'd imagined the email? Was it possible that the photo was someone from outside work that I'd somehow convinced myself worked at Stratford? Was I actually experiencing some kind of delusion? By the end of 2 weeks, I was genuinely unsure about what was real. I was cleared to return to work, but with a note in my file about possible dissociative episodes, and a recommendation that I continue seeing Dr. Reeves on a weekly basis. When I came back to the office, everything felt different. People were friendly but distant. Margaret seemed to be actively avoiding me. Patricia was polite but cold. And no one mentioned Jason Brenner or my absence. I went back to looking at the photo on my phone. Jason Brenner's face stared back at me. But now I wasn't sure what I was looking at. Was it a real person? Was it someone I'd fabricated? Was the photo real, or had I created it somehow without remembering? The uncertainty was worse than the fear had been. A week into my return, I received a message from an unknown email address. It was just a few words: stop asking questions. Stop searching. Stop remembering. It's safer that way. I traced the email to a generic account with no identifying information. I didn't respond. I didn't tell anyone about it. But the message had its intended effect. I stopped searching. I stopped asking questions. I stopped trying to understand what had happened to Jason Brenner. Gradually, my memories began to feel less solid. I could still recall the email, still remember the panic I'd felt when I looked at the internet and Jason was gone from the photo. But it all felt distant now, dreamlike, possibly false. Maybe it had all been in my head. 6 months passed. I continued to see Dr. Reeves, continued to take the medication she'd suggested for my anxiety-related delusions, continued to live my life at Stratford Creative as though nothing had happened. But the photo was still on my phone. And sometimes, late at night, I'd look at it and feel a surge of panic. Because I knew. Somewhere deep in my mind, I knew that Jason Brenner had been real. I knew that he'd been deleted. And I knew that asking about him had been the biggest mistake of my life. Then one day something happened that shook me out of my complacency. I was in a meeting with Derek, Sarah, and Patricia, discussing an upcoming project. And Derek mentioned a designer who'd worked on a similar project last year. Remember Jason did something like that about a year ago? Derek said. The room went silent. Sarah looked at Derek like he'd just said something obscene. Patricia was staring at her notebook with intense focus. Who? I asked quietly. I'm not sure, Derek said, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. I was going to say someone did a similar project, but I can't remember who. He trailed off, genuinely perplexed. And then his expression cleared, like he'd had a moment of clarity before it slipped away again. Never mind, Derek said. Doesn't matter. Let's just focus on the current project. But I'd seen something in that moment. Derek had remembered. For a fraction of a second, Jason Brenner had existed in his memory. And then it had been deleted again, manually erased by whatever force was operating within the company. After the meeting, I went back to my desk and pulled up the photo again. I stared at it for a long time. Then I started to type an email. I was going to explain everything. I was going to detail the impossible events, attach the photo, and send it to everyone. I was going to break my silence and damn the consequences. But before I could finish the email, my computer shut down. The screen went black. The keyboard went dead. Even the lights on the monitor turned off. It was a complete power failure, except that the rest of the office was functioning normally. I waited 5 minutes. Then I restarted my computer. When it came back on, the email I'd been drafting was gone. The photo I'd saved on my desktop was gone. And when I checked my phone, the photo of Jason Brenner was gone there too. All traces of him had been erased again. But this time, it wasn't something that could be dismissed as paranoia or delusion. It was impossible. It was real. And it had happened in real time in front of me. I didn't go home that day. Instead, I sat at my desk, staring at my empty desktop, feeling the weight of something vast and incomprehensible pressing down on me. Margaret came to my desk around 4 p.m. "How are you doing, David?" she asked in a voice that sounded like genuine concern. "Fine," I said automatically. "Everything's fine." "Good," Margaret said. "I just wanted to check in. And I wanted to remind you that Dr. Reeves is available if you need to talk. She said you're making excellent progress." After Margaret left, I realized something. The medical leave, the therapist, the medication. It wasn't treatment. It was precaution. They weren't trying to fix me. They were trying to establish a record of my mental illness in case I became a problem. In case I remembered too much. That evening, I did something I should have done weeks ago. I started researching the company. Not Stratford Creative itself, but its parent organizations, its history, its leaders. Stratford had been founded 30 years ago by 3 people. James Mitchell, Catherine Wu, and Robert Stratford. All 3 were dead now, but their deaths were interesting. Mitchell had died in a car accident in 1998. Wu had committed suicide in 2003. Stratford had simply disappeared in 2007 and was declared legally dead in 2010. I searched for the current leadership. David Kramer, the regional director who'd confronted me, showed up in a few business articles and trade publications. But his biographical information was vague. No education listed. No previous employers. It was like his life started when he joined Stratford. I broadened my search to other employees. I started researching the people I worked with, digging through public records and online histories. What I found was deeply unsettling. Margaret Chen had 3 previous addresses in 3 different states, all changing every 2 to 3 years. There were no social media accounts under her name, no previous employment history I could find. It was like she didn't have a past. Patricia, my manager, was the same. Employment gaps that didn't make sense, addresses that changed frequently, a sparse digital footprint. I was starting to form a theory, and it was one that terrified me. I think Stratford Creative wasn't just a company. I think it was something else. Something that employed people with no verifiable histories, people who could move through the world without leaving traces. And I think Jason Brenner had been one of them. I think Jason had made a mistake. I think he'd become visible somehow, had been noticed by someone outside the company. And I think that when I asked about him, I triggered some kind of protocol. A deletion protocol. And now I was at risk too because I'd asked. The question was, what would they do to me? The answer came 3 weeks later. I was called into Margaret's office. She wasn't alone. David Kramer was there, along with 2 security guards I'd never seen before. David Kramer said, "We need to have a serious conversation about your future with Stratford Creative." "Okay," I said carefully. "You've been a reliable employee," he continued. "You've done good work. But lately you've shown signs of instability. False beliefs, confusion, memory problems. Your therapist has documented all of this." "I'm better now," I said. "I haven't had any episodes in." "I'm not talking about delusions," David interrupted. "I'm talking about something more fundamental. You've seen something you shouldn't have seen. And now you're a liability." I said nothing. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. "We have 2 options for you," David continued. "Option 1. You sign a very comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, you commit to continuing therapy, and you accept a lateral transfer to one of our other facilities in another state where you'll be monitored. You keep your job, your salary, your benefits, but you leave Seattle. You leave behind your apartment, your friends, your life. And you never speak to anyone about your experience here." "And option 2? I asked. "Option 2 is that we fire you for cause, based on your documented mental health issues. We file reports with the state medical board about Dr. Reeves' concerns. And we make sure that no company in this industry will hire you again. You'll be unemployable, radioactive, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that people in positions of power are watching you, waiting for you to make a mistake so they can destroy you further." I stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're not going to sign the NDA, are you?" David said. It wasn't a question. "You're going to try to expose us. And we can't allow that." "I won't say anything," I said desperately. "I just want to forget. I want to move on." "No, you don't," David said. "You've already proven that. You've already asked questions, already searched, already tried to piece together what happened. You'll keep doing it. The curiosity will eat at you. Eventually you'll talk." "I won't," I pleaded. "You will," David said with absolute certainty. "So here's what's going to happen. The guards will escort you to your home. You'll pack a bag with the essentials. Nothing else. No documents, no photos, no phone. We'll provide you with a new phone, a new identity, a new life in Portland. Starting tomorrow, you're no longer David Whitmore. You're someone else. You have a different job, a different apartment, a different name. What if I refuse? I asked. David smiled. It was a smile without warmth or humanity. Then you disappear like Jason did. Completely. No one remembers you. Your apartment is rented to someone else. Your job is filled. Your friends forget your name. You simply cease to exist. I understood then what had happened to Jason Brenner. He hadn't been fired. He hadn't quit. He'd been erased. Not just from the company, but from existence. From memory. From reality itself. And I was about to suffer the same fate, unless I accepted the alternative. I left Seattle 3 days later with a new name, a new identity, and a new life in Portland, Oregon. I work for a different company now, in a different field. I have an apartment, a car, a routine. I follow all the rules. But I haven't forgotten. I can't forget, even though part of me desperately wants to. Even though accepting the forgetting would be easier, safer, less painful. Because I know what's real. I know what happened to Jason Brenner. And I know that I'm being watched, every moment of every day, waiting for me to step out of line. I'm writing this now because I felt like I had to document it somewhere. I'm posting it anonymously on the internet, in a place where Stratford Creative might not find it. Or maybe they already have. Maybe they're reading this right now and they're deciding what to do about me. Maybe they'll let this go as the delusional ranting of a mentally ill man. Maybe they'll erase me. I don't know anymore what's real and what isn't. My therapist back in Seattle did such a good job of making me doubt my own mind that I can't trust my own memories anymore. But I can trust the feeling in my bones, the certainty that lives in the dark part of my consciousness. Jason Brenner existed. He was real. And they deleted him. And they would have done the same to me if I hadn't accepted their offer. I'm telling this story as a warning. If you work for Stratford Creative Group or any of its subsidiaries, be careful what you ask. Be careful what you remember. Be careful about noticing things that don't make sense. Because the company exists in the spaces between things. In the gaps in memory. In the inconsistencies that most people overlook. And if you notice those gaps, if you try to fill them with questions and investigation, they'll notice you. And then they'll delete you. Just like they deleted Jason Brenner. Just like they tried to delete me. I sometimes wonder if Jason is still alive somewhere. If he was given a new name and a new life in some other city, living in constant fear like I am. Or if he was actually erased, truly deleted from existence, leaving behind nothing but a shadow in the memory of someone who had the misfortune of asking about him. I'll never know. And that's the most terrifying thing of all. Not the disappearance itself, but the uncertainty. The knowledge that someone I cared about, or at least someone I cared about once before my memories were rewritten, might have been completely unmade, reduced to nothing, forgotten by everyone including themselves. The rules are clear now. I follow them absolutely. I don't ask questions. I don't investigate. I don't try to contact anyone from my old life. I don't keep photos or documents. I don't maintain any persistent record of who I was or what I've experienced. I am a ghost living in the material world. A person with a name that isn't real, working a job that doesn't matter, existing in a space that's both here and not here. And every day, I wait to see if they'll finally decide I'm not worth the effort of monitoring. Every day, I wait to be deleted. I think that's what Jason is doing too, somewhere out there in this strange existence. Waiting for the erasure. Waiting for the final deletion. Waiting for the release of being forgotten completely. And sometimes, late at night, I think that might not be the worst fate. Being deleted. Ceasing to exist. Never having to live with the knowledge of what they do to people who ask the wrong questions. That might actually be a mercy.